Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, thank you very much for holding this hearing and this excellent panel because, first of all, we have GAO who has continually sounded the alarm on these projects, and we're very grateful for the reports. Many of us actually read these reports. I know the Washington Post says we don't always read them and so on, but I think the appropriators really love GAO and Inspector General reports. So thank you. And at this table here, I think we have the right people who have the spirit of reform and transformation. So my questions will go not so much to finger point, but to pinpoint how we can move ahead to clean up any mess that we have and to prevent any future messes from happening. So let me, join some of my colleagues on our skepticism, because when I hear that DOD, Treasury, and OPM has nothing on the dashboard, when my own constituent service says, particularly with DOD and OPM, my dashboard lights up. I know these issues here come from two sources. One is we look at budgetary constraints and project after project, big idea, big project, big failure, big bucks, and canceled, terminated, delayed. But I also have a whole other source of information. People who call senatorbarb.gov and say, I need help. Where are my backlogs? What my caseload in Maryland is exploding on three backlogs: the VA disability backlog, the Social Security disability backlog, and the OPM retirement backlog. And therefore, and then when we go to look at these, we find that their roots and origin lie in technology. So you see where I'm coming from. I want to save money, and I also want to respond to the mission. So this then takes me to let's go to the veterans backlog. You have several committees. You have the VA committee that's trying to meet this. And they worked on a bipartisan basis, Senator Johnson, Senator Kirk. Okay, then I held a hearing and had General Shinseki, Mr. Hagel, Ms. Colvin, and so on. Well, first we found that they weren't reporting, and then we find now that DOD and VA have computers that don't talk to each other. VA and DOD have electronic health records that can't talk. 2008, Congress ordered them to create an interoperable system. 2013, Hagel and Shinseki say they're abandoning the effort. The agencies have spent $1 billion in 5 years and have nothing to show for it. And now we hear that the agencies are developing two separate systems that aren't sure that they're going to merge and talk with each other. And in the meantime, the number of Iraq and Afghan vets who are applying for benefits is increasing. They shouldn't have to stand in line because we can't go digital at the VA and have these interoperable systems. This is to me a cameo of what's wrong. And I could go to OPM. I know you're trying, and you have an excellent reform framework here, and I compliment you on it. But your records are in a cave in Pennsylvania. Your records are in a cave 9 stories down into Pennsylvania with a dated, dysfunctional system. That's not an accusation. It's not a fault. It's a fact. And when they try to pull these records up, you know what happens. They don't work. They get inaccurate assessments. I can tell my colleagues, we have a substantial number of federal retirees in Maryland because we have the great federal labs, et cetera, the miscalculations, et cetera. So I could come back to you, but you're not even on the dashboard, but you're on my dashboard. So, but let's go to the VA. So Mr. Rokel, you're Mr. OMB. You say that OMB needs more help because their workload's expanding. I acknowledge that. I've talked extensively with Ms. Burrow. But tell me, what is the role of OMB number one, in being aware of the problem, number two, correcting the problem. How much muscle do you have? How much clout do you have? And how could we correct that problem, but use that as an example, because many of these cut across agency lines.
Thank you, ma'am. I think when you mentioned techno boondoggles earlier, I think that they have some defining characteristics that we've seen sort of time and time again. And the private sector has gone through a big transition in the last 15 years on its view of technology, really going from a very discretionary thing. It was the ability to send an email or print a document or call the help desk to this very strategic thing. It's the way it's the way you market your products. It's the way you control supply and demand and inventory and quality and connect with your customers in special ways. I would contend that the government's going through that transition now, that we're in the midst of that inflection point, and the hangover of not being to the other end of that inflection is really kind of defined by the boondoggle-ish kind of characteristics, which are, when faced with a problem, we see a single big procurement go out to typically a single big monolithic vendor with a multi-year specification that runs out to an end that tends to lead to a very large failure at the end of that, where in year one you may have a great idea, in year two you have no results to show to get that justifies getting funding in out years. And at the pace of change of technology, the turnover of people in the government, all these things contribute to not leading you to the end result that you want to see. And so our first order of business is really thinking about how do we change that big monolithic approach into what modern internet companies do today, which are delivering results very, very quickly. You may not know, if you use Facebook, go up on Facebook, there's probably a new version of Facebook that comes out every month or so. They turn over all the time. You just don't know it because you just get to take advantage of that. And so bringing that into government and setting government-wide policy is core to my direction. The second part of this is deeper engagement with agencies. The federal enterprise, a lot of people misconceive that my organization is the IT shop on the 6th floor of the building, and we roll up our sleeves and we sort of dive in. The federal enterprise is practically a sector of the economy. It's so large, and the ability for a very modest group at OMB, and speaking in small double digits on my team, don't have the ability to dive in and write code and develop solutions. What I propose in the 15 budget is really about how do we create a mechanism, instead of reactively when things are going wrong, proactively go in and engage with agencies to help them right the ship. And by doing that,
do you have the authority, clout, and resources to go across to agencies or to pick out something that is heading towards a disaster?
I believe I do, yes. I have the authority to work with the OMB director and the agencies on formulating the president's budget. I have government-wide policy authority through my role in OMB, and that authority gives me the ability to go in and stop projects. And as Mr. Powner mentioned, we have done that in agencies through the tech step process. But going in reactively is often too late. I think we need to go in on these projects like VA and others.
Do you have the authority, clout, and resources to go in early?
Yes, ma'am.
So what can we do to clean up the VA? Not the VA. What could we do to solve? It goes beyond the VA, and with the indulgence of my colleagues, because I know how passionately you feel about this problem, of this veterans disability long line, and also the inability of VA to seem to go digital. I've walked into Baltimore office, the third worst field office in the nation, trying to correct it. If you look at the records of a single vet, I'm 4'11" on a good day. Some of those records are almost as high as I am. And you've got dedicated staff foraging through records, trying to pluck a piece of paper to really be able to process the claim.
Yeah, and
so what can you do about it, and what will you do about it? And can I have your word that when you leave here, it'll be your top priority?
So I have a personal interest in the VA. My father, who's probably watching the webcast right now, just had his knee replaced at a veterans hospital in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Vietnam vet. I've actually been working with the Department of Veterans Affairs on helping shape the direction to take. I think it speaks to the chairman's earlier comment around CIO authorities, and I think the key thing to consider there is that a lot of these programs that are happening in government is not just an IT problem. It's not just the CIO, and just giving the CIO authority, you're not going to get to where you need to go. It really takes a collective effort across how are we thinking about process.
I know what it takes. I need to have 3 to 5 concrete steps that Memorial Day, when I go out and talk to my veterans, I want to be able to tell them we're, in addition to the bipartisan commitment of spending financial resources to do it, that it's going to happen. And you cannot leave this to Shinseki and Hagel. And I'm not knocking those men, whatever. We've got to solve the problem. And if there's one thing the Congress of the United States agrees on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the dome, no veteran should stand in line to have their disability benefit processed. So how can we do this? And what would you tell me to tell those veterans that we're going to do that?
I would say that one, that I am the federal CIO, am committed to working on this, and I would welcome working with you and your staff and the committee and the larger Congress on driving this forward, as well as working with my counterparts across government who play an important role in this, and with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Deputy Secretary of VA and I have had many conversations around the work to be done here, and thinking about really the smart application of technology. And I think they're making good strides on the Veterans Benefit Management Systems. I think it's a good application of process. We need to really look and deeply look at process, and we've been working with the department on really rethinking some core processes in light of technology. And third is working with the veteran service organizations. You know, they are the front line really of a lot of this. Right. And we need a closer working relationship with them to encourage all of them to really submit fully developed veterans claims electronically, which we have the capability to receive from them, but we predominantly still get paper through that pipeline. And so we inherently create a problem by the veteran service organizations, sort of the lack of sort of electronic.
Well, I appreciate everything you said. My time is up, and in fact, the chair has been most indulgent with my time. And this goes to everybody. So for all of you and the recommendations of GAO, first of all, that's not an accurate number. It doesn't include independent agencies. It doesn't include the legislative branch and the judicial branch, which in and of itself is something. So that's one thing. The underestimation of the problem, I think, exists. Number two, what I would like to suggest, Mr. Chairman, is that we survey the subcommittee chairs and get from the subcommittee chairs what they consider the top 3 issues in technology. From health.gov, which was brought up, what we have in CJS, veterans, and then do it. But I would really, and then OPM and your situation. We have to do this, and I'm going to ask you to not put us in a priority, but show you the way as we fund this year's appropriation, we cannot have waste. And if this were fraud, we would say one corrupt contractor, but this is dysfunction. This isn't corruption. So we need a sense of urgency, which I believe you have, and you have the people in place now, I believe the president, so that we can move on this. But we cannot tolerate this in this committee. We have to get value for the dollar, accountable to the taxpayer, and fulfill the mission of our agencies. So let's go forward together.